There are no minutes when you're done. A couple that might come into being, let's suppose I don't know how you're structured, but your top staff person retires or goes to Florida or a different job, and you're going to replace that person. You would consider that perhaps an executive level position. So you would form an executive level search committee to look for a replacement. Executive level search committees can operate outside of freedom of information. Even if you name yourselves in your entirety as the search committee. So you would name a search committee, and then that way the resumes and the applications and the interviews could all take place behind closed doors in an unnoticed meeting, because it's under FOI, it's not a meeting. I get why this is difficult. The term that people have taken to using is the non-meeting. Have you ever done a bunch of interviews for a top-level position? You're in there forever. It feels like a meeting. It operates like a meeting, but for the purposes of Connecticut legislation, FOI, not a meeting. And that one actually makes some sense when you think about it. You're probably going to get applications from people who already are employed, who don't want their current employers to know that they're looking, and that way you could protect them until you've actually picked a candidate, and you would go forward. It's a good point for me to jump in, and again, the fact that you've got somebody on the phone, assuming he's still awake, that cocktails haven't knocked him out. When I read you the definition, whether in person or by means of electronic equipment, clearly this is an example. He's participating via electronic equipment. Everybody knows it's him. He can hear everybody and be heard when he speaks. But you have to be careful, because it's much more than that in today's world. We're talking about emails, we're talking about texts, we're talking about Twitter and Facebook and all those things, all those methods we use to communicate with each other. Be very careful. The chairman has an idea that she wants to share with all of you. She sends it out. Fine. I feel very strongly about this, fellow board members. I want you all to look at this. Fine. But when you write back to her and tell her that's the dumbest thing you've ever heard, and then you jump in and say, no, wait a minute, I like that idea, and you start having the discussion that you should be having here at the table via email, you've got a problem. You're rolling down the hill of an illegal, improper meeting. So curb your use of those things to what you want on the agenda. Ideas you might have to share that everybody should read before the next meeting. Or, of course, I missed the last meeting. Can you fill me in? Stuff like that. But if you start deliberating over things, and again, with land use, you have another problem with ex parte. Gee, what did you think of that application? My God, don't do that. You can help me with that as well. But, just be careful the extent to which you have those conversations over those vehicles. It's a double-edged sword, too, because not only could you be having an improper meeting, those become public records. So somebody says, I want to see any and all emails between P&Z members about that controversial application. You'd be obligated to produce them, whether you are writing on a town email account, whether you are working at home, whether your laptop, your phone, it doesn't matter. If it has to do with Shelton business, it becomes a public record. So you've got a problem in two ways that way. Just be real careful the extent to which you use those devices to talk to each other, as it were. The last thing with meetings that we should talk about is minutes. Is that your responsibility? I see you giggling over there, yeah? I feel your pain. I do the FOI commission meeting minutes, I get it. Here's the key on minutes, folks. They need not be the recreation of War and Peace. They are not every word that everybody says. They are not verbatim transcripts of what happens here tonight. Technically, the only thing that's required is a record of who votes for what or for whom. So that I pick them up and I know that it was a 4-3 vote, and these three voted no. Now, you want more than that in your minutes. You want to have a crisp, clear, concise recapitulation of what happened, what was discussed, but not every word that everybody says. And you'll get that. People will come in and they'll say, hey, wait a minute, I said this, that, and the, I want it in the minutes. Well, if you want to put it in, it's up to you, but it's not required. My strongest recommendation is crisp minutes, nice and concise, that have that record of the votes, so that if I pick them up in a couple of weeks, I know what happened, but it's not chapter and verse, it's not a transcript of the meeting. You just don't have to do that. And people say, well, why? The number of times I've seen, did I say that? I didn't really mean to say that. I sound kind of stupid. Could we take that out? Believe me, you want the less you have Less is more when it comes to minutes. Minutes need to be available in 7 days. You want to make sure that your minutes are available in 7 days. Other boards say, well, wait a minute, we don't meet again in 7 days, we can't approve them. It doesn't matter. The minutes need to be available in 7 days. If you're going to make changes, let's suppose a week from today, those minutes are in. If you want to make changes to those, you make them at the next meeting. The minutes from the next meeting reflect any changes you make in the ones you have in on time after tonight's meeting.
So Saturday and Sunday is part of the day count.
Okay, now somebody always asks that, and I want to bang my head against the podium. We asked the legislature that, right? And they said, we got you on that. It's 7 calendar days for a regular meeting, but 7 business days for a special meeting. Don't shoot the messenger, but that's what it is. So in the time we have left, first of all, are there any questions about anything we didn't talk about meeting-wise? Yeah.
I got a question about the minutes.
Yeah.
So tonight, her minutes need to be done by next Tuesday.
Correct.
We don't need to do anything, she turns them into the, town clerk?
Yep.
That's the end.
And in your office too.
In our office.
Right.
If we wanna make changes, because we didn't like something in there, it wasn't right, well, the following meeting, we would address that and make
Correct.
changes to this.
And the changes wouldn't, that document is final. The changes are reflected in the next set of minutes. So if you really want to see if there are any significant, now, the only time I recommend a new set is if the changes you make the first set unrecognizable.
Okay.
Otherwise, you look at the next set of minutes and say, okay, they're unanimously approved with the following changes, and then you cross-check them.
Right, so we don't need to do the draft thing.
You don't want to do that.
Well, our minutes have been handed into the staff office.
Mm-hmm.
Their responsibility is to get them to the town clerk, is that?
That's fine, that's certainly fine.
Now, do the minutes have to be, because we have a city website, they have to be posted?
There is no requirement that the minutes be put on a website. Most boards, most commissions do, but you're not violating FOI if you don't. I would encourage you to put them up. For no other reason than they're there, people know they're there, and they're not bothering you or calling you up and saying, where are the minutes, I want them. They're right there for everybody to see, but it's not a requirement under FOI.
That would apply to the agenda, not having to be required to be on the.
The only agenda requirement is for a special meeting. Special meeting agendas must be on the website. Regular meetings do not.
How many days before a special meeting?
At least 24 hours.
24 hours.
And just as an aside, you think in 2008, then Governor Rell said, I want everything on websites. So they passed a law, everything on websites. A lot of towns, especially some of the smaller ones, got really worked up. Oh, we can't do it, we don't have the personnel, we don't know how to do it. Legislature said, thanks for checking in, but do it anyway. So for a couple of years they've worked, some towns actually took their websites down. They were so afraid of violating the law. So a lot of people got it up and running, people learned how to do it, and then 2 years later the legislature said, never mind. They said that was an unfunded mandate, and the only requirement, they left it up for state agencies like us, but for municipalities, the only requirement is special meeting agendas, that's it. Otherwise, no requirement for website postings. So, let's talk, I'm looking at the clock here, I'll give you a couple minutes about records. I sort of hit on it before when we were talking about, emailing and texting and stuff like that. Here's the bottom line. When you create a record in the conduct of Shelton's business, any record, anytime, anywhere, any place, it's defined as a public record. And in theory, somebody can ask to look at it, or somebody can make a written request for a copy. Now, having said that, there are multiple exemptions and statutes that pull things off, all kinds of things. But you don't want to think about those when somebody asks you for a record. Because what all too often happens is that some people get possessive. They're P&Z records, you can't have them, oh, I'm not sure you should see that, blah, blah, blah. Think of it as a public record, and then look to see if perhaps there's an exemption or an exclusion or something like that that says you can't give it out. We get into the most trouble when we try to figure it out based on what our gut or what our instinct says. You're not from around here, why should I give it to you? What are you going to do with it? None of that matters. Just think of it in plain terms as a public record, and you'll probably stay out of trouble. Some people just don't get that. They can't understand it. So I'm going to share with you an example of what not to do, but it'll give you some concept as to, okay, now I think. So the requester in this case is a quasi-journalist. We'll call him. He does a blog. He does a public access TV show, and in Hartford he's been around a lot. He's made a lot of requests. to the point where the city kind of, you know, they really don't like him anymore. But you gotta put blinders on, folks. You have to understand that public records, and that this is an important law to get our democracy running, to make sure people are involved. So anyway, in this case, he asked the city for two things. He asked the city for a record of payment, a record of bills submitted to the city by a law firm, and then a record of payment from the law firm, from the city to the law firm. So if you ever get a request for under FOI, and some of you have to deal with them, you have to respond in 4 business days. So if you as board members ever get one, get to the right person, and response doesn't necessarily mean produce the records, it means acknowledge. But if you don't do that, at the very least, you've told the requester no, and they can file one of those complaints with the FOI Commission. So always, at the very least, respond in 4 business days. So in this case, the Corporation Counsel, the attorney for the City of Hartford, responds, I have your FOI request and will coordinate the response. Such documentation as is allowed or required by law will be provided. That's an okay response. It's not a problem, so at least you responded. But here is the problem. In the process of responding to this individual, whom he does not like, the Corporation Counsel for the City of Hartford accidentally copied the individual, a journalist, on an email he had written to somebody else about how much he didn't like him. Everything's a public record. Think. So now in the hands of the journalist is the following. I'll clean it up since we've got an audience. Carl, so who lit a fire under this? It's a bad word that starts with an A. If he's involved in litigation, ongoing or other projects that he hasn't asked about, can I shut him down? So the real response isn't thank you for your FOI request, I'll look into it, it's your, how do I get rid of it? So the journalist has a field day with this. He pops it up on the blog, it's on the public access TV, and he's connected. It's on WFSB at 6 o'clock, it's in the Current the next morning. Hartford doesn't look very good. So the Corporation Counsel says, gee, I better do something about this. So he tries to write him a letter, tries to walk it back, as it were, but he just can't do it. In his letter of apology, another public record is the following. Apparently you have little else to do other than to pester me in this office and other city departments. Recall that I do not work for you. The purpose of the FOIA statute is not to provide you a playground. Hey guys, even if you think this, please don't write it. You've created yet another public record that thumbs your nose at the guy, at the law. To what end? None. And now that makes the rounds as well. And what made this case particularly galling is, because he felt so strongly, and we have feelings about people sometimes, he never bothered to look at what he was asking for. None of the records fell under any exemptions, and the next headline we see is Hartford loses at FOI Commission. Think before you write. Think before you send. You're taking notes here tonight, right? They're technically public records. Now, there is an exemption for notes. Probably not going to have to give them out, but if the chairman's notes become part of a permanent file, they could go out too. It's not unlikely. I'm exaggerating to make a point. So always think in terms of, gee, it's a public record. I might have to give it out. I'll close the records part with one other little story. I'm looking, got 1 minute. Woman calls a couple weeks ago. She says, hi, my name is Sean. I said, hi, Sean, how are you? She said, good. I'm calling you from Georgia. Just calling Connecticut FOI from Georgia. She says, yeah, my husband is an out-of-state contractor, and he did a job in Connecticut last summer. And I think he had an affair with a state worker. Why is she calling me? It wasn't me. Why? Because she wants to see that worker's emails and texts and phone records. My answer to her is, if they have to do with that project, the email that says, meet me at the construction trailer at 6 o'clock, we'll review the blueprints, and then, you know, ... That's a public record. That's a public record, and she could get it. She said, good, it'll help me with my divorce. Think before you write, think before you send, think about doing your work in public, and you won't have any issues at all. I know you've got a meeting. Do you have any questions at all that I can answer quickly? Anything at all? Okay, I brought with me, for your reading pleasure, or for your, I don't know, we'll call them parting gifts. This is what I call the Freedom of Information American Express card. Don't leave home without it. It's highlights of the FOI Act. This is great for a wallet, a purse, a desk drawer, something to have on the fly. On the back, folks, is our phone number, please don't hesitate to call if you have a question. It's never a problem. I will get back to you. I have witnesses. I'm on the phone a lot. You may get a voicemail, but I will call you back. And I also brought some of these, which can be helpful. This is a grid that tells you about meetings, when meetings should be noticed, when minutes are due, things like that. And it gives you different ideas on that. And I think I hit the mark, so thank you.
Thank you.